I'm here at my home, and today I want to go through quite a number of books that I recommend that you read if you want to become an expert marketer. And I'm going to go through one by one, explain to you about the author, and also explain to you why you need to read it. And so we're going to go through each book. And like I said, if you want to become an expert in the field, then this is where you start. You start to learn. If you want to become a student of marketing, you're going to be an eternal student. You're going to go back to the greats, the pioneers of the industry. You're going to go to people who are doing things now and everywhere, and anyone in between. And so you want to really know what are the classics, which are the books, what are the principles that you need to know, and avoid the ones that obviously are no good or can lead you astray. So I'm going to get straight into it. So the first book that I recommend is a book called How to Write a Good Advertisement by Victor Schwab. And Victor Schwab was quite an interesting character. He is from the early 1900s, and it was written in the early 1900s. And he worked on a lot of famous ads. He's the one that made the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. He wrote the ads for that book and made it famous, as well as a whole lot of other things as well. So definitely check out that book, because it's going to give you a lot of insight on what you need to look at when you're creating ads and all the structures and everything else like that. So my next book that I want you to check out is a book called The Lasker Story by a guy called Albert Lasker. Now, Albert Lasker is a very important character in the industry. He is considered the father of modern advertising. He practically invented the marketing industry as it is today. Before he came along, advertising and marketing was just about selling space in newspapers and magazines. But he came along and basically established the copywriting field through a couple of contacts. He met John E. Kennedy, who is a pioneer in copywriting, and then later on Claude Hopkins, which I'm going to talk to you about later. Those three characters were at the forefront of marketing in the very early days, the early 1900s, and those three people really set the scene, started the industry, and set the direction for the industry. So definitely need to check out The Lasker Story. There was a book written by another person about Albert Lasker called Taken at the Flood. It's a biography. It's quite an older book, and I recommend that you get it because it's a classic, but actually prefer another book that was written about Albert Lasker called The Man Who Sold America. So that's probably my preference for that book there over the Taken at the Flood book. This is quite more accurate, and it just goes into a lot more detail about what they were doing, and especially with the work they were doing with Claude Hopkins and things like that too. So definitely check out this one, The Man Who Sold America. It's about Albert Lasker. Okay, the next book is Scientific Advertising. You need to read this book. And I know David Ogilvy once said that every employee had to read this 10 times before they could become an employee of Ogilvy and Mather, which I'm going to talk about David Ogilvy later on as well. The story goes with Albert Lasker. He hired Claude Hopkins in 1907 when Hopkins was about 41 years old. And by that stage, Claude Hopkins actually had $1 million already, so he didn't even need to work, so he was retired. Now, $1 million in 1907 is obviously extraordinarily large amount of money compared to what that might be today. It could be maybe $100 million, for example. So he managed to entice him back into work by pretty much just presenting the job as a favor towards Lasker, and that's how he won him across, and ended up doing some amazing work for companies like Palmolive, the Goodyear Tire Company, many household brands that were at that time small businesses that nobody had ever heard of. So definitely check out this book, Scientific Advertising by Claude C. Hopkins. The next book is another quintessential book by my mentor, Jay Abraham, who obviously has had a large impact on my life, my career, and made me, had a large bearing on my success. So his book is called Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got. If you're in business, in any type of business, you need to have this book, and you need to have it handy. You need to read it many times over. This book will transform your business in one reading, let alone if you go back and read it every year, which I recommend you do. So Jay Abraham wrote this book, and can't recommend any of these books enough, but definitely get your hands on this book as well. It's a modern classic, and Jay Abraham's, what can I say? My next book recommendation is The Boring Letters by Gary Halbert. And Gary Halbert is considered the #1 copywriter of all time. This book was actually a series of letters that he wrote, that Gary wrote to his son Bond while Gary did a stint in jail, which is a story I won't get into today. But he wrote letters to his son Bond Halbert, from jail, teaching him the industry, and really showing him exactly what he needed to do to become a successful copywriter. So it's super powerful, it's super personal, and it's one of the must-haves as well. So the Bryan letters. As an extra bonus, check out a website called the Gary Halbert Letter. It's free resources for anyone to jump on there and read all the letters, the newsletters that Gary Halbert was writing at the time. So considering he's the #1 copywriter of all time, you definitely want to check out all of his stuff. And there's a long list of amazing things that Gary did in his lifetime, including doing the coat of arms letter, which is a famous letter he mailed out in the mail 600 million times, made hundreds of millions of dollars from this letter, and then sold his company for $90 million, which is all from one single sales letter that took him 18 months to write. So check out the Bryan letters, check out Gary Halbert's work. My next book is what I would call the marketing Bible. It's called the Robert Collier Letter Book. Quite a simple title, Robert Collier Letter Book. And it's about a guy, it's written by a guy called Robert Collier, who is one of the just icons in marketing. And, I just love this guy. He's an amazing guy from early 1900s. He made $20 million from sending letters out in the mail during the Great Depression, where most people couldn't even afford to eat. He was raking in millions of dollars. And I actually did a calculation. So he made $20 million through writing letters, and I did a calculation that would be actually $220 million in today's money. So it's extraordinary the amazing results that he got from doing direct response marketing and letters. And we actually still use a lot of these principles in our company for sales letters, and they work amazingly on Facebook. So another book that you definitely want to check out and read and really understand the psychology, because he's going into psychology of why things work, when you use certain phrases, why do they make people tick and things like that. So, and examples of exactly what he did. He sold raincoats, he sold all sorts of things. But we've used the same principles to sell things like mortgages and gym memberships and all kinds of things. So it's applicable to any kind of industry. Robert Collier Letter Book, definitely a must-have. Okay, my next book is a book called Great Leads. It's quite a modern book. It wasn't written that long ago. And we spoke about, Jay Abraham's book, which is quite modern, and we spoke about a lot of other books that are, 100 odd years old as well, but the principles still apply. So that's why I highly recommend that you will go back to these classics, the pioneers of the industry, because this stuff, humans don't change. Obviously technology does, but human psychology, how people think and how people live, very, very similar. And so that's why these principles still apply today. But this book's quite a modern book. It's a book called Great Leads by two people, Michael Masterson and John Ford. And a trivia fact for you, Michael Masterson is a pen name for a guy called Mark Ford. His actual real name is Mark Ford. So you can Google him up and see what kind of things he's been up to. He works with Agora Incorporated and a lot of other major companies. Agora is the largest direct mail company in the world, doing some $1 billion plus, some ridiculous amount of money per year. And this book, Great Leads, the 6 easiest ways to start a sales message, is a powerful book for you to get your head around the concept of the 5 levels of customer awareness, which is a concept invented by a guy called Eugene Schwartz, which I'll get to him later. But very powerful book. Another classic, you got to get this book. You need to have this book in your library. You need to read it a lot. Next book recommendation, another modern classic by Joe Sugerman, who is, quite an interesting character. The ADWEEK Copywriting Handbook, another great book by Joe Sugerman. Interesting facts about Joe Sugerman. He's the first person to use 800 or toll-free phone numbers in ads. He's also the first person to ever do credit card orders over the phone. So one day he gets a call because he's selling things, through the mail. He gets a call and says, "Hey, I really need to buy this product. I don't have time to send the order form back to you with my signature. Can we do it over the phone?" And he goes, "Oh, geez, nobody has ever asked me to do that before. I don't know. I guess we could do this." So went ahead and did the first credit card order over the phone, because back then it was actually illegal to do that, because the credit card companies didn't allow anyone to do that. And he's like, "Oh, this is cool. This might be easier for me to get more sales." So he started doing a lot more credit card orders over the phone. And American Express called him one day and said, "We've decided to allow you to take credit cards over the phone." So that's just opened up the whole bag for everyone. Now we can use the internet, we can use phones, but he's the one that pioneered that whole concept of doing it over the phone. Interesting fact. But the book itself, the ADWEEK Copywriting Handbook, another must-have. He's he goes into things like psychological triggers and structures and things like that. So definitely want to check this one too. Another modern classic written in 1999 is if you have this book in your library, it means you're a serious marketer. Not many people actually have this book or have even read it. So Method Marketing, How to Make a Fortune by Getting Inside the Heads of Your Customers, by a guy called Denny Hatch or Dennison Hatch, written in 1999. And what I like about this book is it goes through real case studies of marketing campaigns. And it not only shows you campaigns that worked really well, but it also shows you campaigns that didn't work and things that people got wrong and just things that companies were doing that were just like, this is stupid, this is why they did it, and this is what happened. Because it's giving you a contrast between this is what works really well and then here's how a company really screwed it up. So great book, Method Marketing as well. It's one of those books that if you see it on someone's bookshelf, they're a real student of marketing. So it's kind of like a badge of honor, if you will. Next book is by a guy called John Caples. He started his career in marketing in 1925. It's a book called Tested Advertising Methods. Great book. Another classic you need to have. So he wrote, you might have known the famous ad that goes, "They laughed at me when I sat down to play the piano." Also wrote ads for Wall Street Journal, US Steel, many other companies as well. He's one of the very first people to do split testing. So Claude Hopkins practically invented split testing. This guy took it to the next level. By 1970, he was doing 40-way split testing through mail. So you can figure out how complicated that is to do a split test without, using one of those pieces of software that do it now all for you automatically. So pretty incredible guy. Tested Advertising Methods, another one that you need to get and consume and read several times. However, you need to get the 4th edition, not the 5th edition, because some guy come along and really messed with it. A guy called Fred Hahn. I'm not going to hold it against him. He's probably a nice guy, but you really want to get the 4th edition, not the 5th edition. So if you can get this, you probably will only be able to get this secondhand. I mean, if you can't get this for whatever reason, then obviously you get the 5th edition, but this is the better version. So try to get this one. I'm sure you can get it secondhand from somewhere, so try to get that one. Next book is Ogilvy on Advertising. David Ogilvy, one of my all-time heroes as well of the marketing industry. One of the best copywriters to ever live as well, and wrote some amazingly famous ads like the Rolls-Royce ad and ads for a lot of other major companies as well. Sold billions of dollars in advertising services. And, he's one of the guys that really was kind of like the father of everyone and, really set, he's the one that said, you need to read Claude Hopkins' book 10 times before you work for me. And really, really took it seriously and had a real passion for the industry. And that's one of the reasons why I love him, because he really, really took it upon himself to really take care of the industry and really develop it. And his passion for advertising really showed through with what his actions were and everything else like that. So definitely get Ogilvy on Advertising. Very cool man. Our next book is probably the newest book I'm going to recommend to you today. It's called Waiting for Your Cat to Bark by Bryan and Jeffrey Eisenberg, who are icons in internet marketing. I think this is probably one of the first actual marketing books I ever bought. besides, the classics like J. Abraham and things like that. It's called Persuading Customers When They Ignore Marketing. It's quite a good book. And the thing that I like about this book is it switches the brain and makes you think about, instead of the sales process, what's the buyer process? What is your customer doing during the process of, researching, choosing the product, figuring out what company they want to go with. And then it allows you to really reverse engineer what you're doing to map what the buyer process is. So great book as well. Waiting for Your Cat to Bark. Funny name, but it's a good book. Next book is a book by a guy called Russell Reeves called Reality in Advertising. About 1961, I think this was written. And Russell Reeves, big on unique selling propositions, big on the real frameworks of marketing. He wrote some famous ads that are still actually being used today. So M&M, the M&M ad that you see, or variations of that ad and the USP that he created all the way back in the 1960s. They use it a lot still in marketing for companies like M&M and a few other companies like that. So it's stood the test of time, if you will. And I don't know if you know the story of M&Ms, but originally M&Ms were just part of a ration kit for the US Army. And then he created it into a consumer product that it is today. So interesting story too. But check out Reality in Advertising. Next book is a book by George Frederick called Masters of Advertising Copy. And it's a complete course of the principles and practice of writing advertising and direct mail copy that sells. It's a collection of ideas by people like Claude, Hopkins and a lot of other icons about, how and why things work and why certain copy works and things like that. So definitely check out Masters of Advertising Copy. It's kind of like a quintessential, reference book of all different types of things. It's an eclectic collection. And another one that you definitely want to check out, because you're going to learn a lot by doing it and reading it over again, which I recommend you do for all these books, is have them in your collection and revisit them over and over again as much as you can. Next book is quite a weird book to have in your collection called Obvious Atoms. Very small book, as you can see. Very big text as well. So if you have difficulty reading, maybe start with this one because you're going to get through it pretty quickly. By a guy called Robert Updegraff. In 1916, this was first published, and not long after that, it was basically lodged into the historical records for one of the most important books to be ever written, which is surprising because it's such a small book. But it's a story, like a novel, about a guy called Adams, Obvious Atoms. Very interesting book to really get your head around and be more creative and things like that about marketing and advertising and business. So easy read. You could read it in, half an hour or whatever. Definitely check that out book as well. Okay, next book is by a guy called Dan Kennedy, which is a guy everybody should know. He's written a lot of books, and this book specifically is called The Ultimate Sales Letter. Pretty standard. You understand what a sales letter is, you know what the book's going to be about. So The Ultimate Sales Letter goes through a lot of cool things about psychology and also structure and making sales letters work really well, by Dan Kennedy. Another one that you want to check out. He's a smart man. Anything he's put out is super smart. He started out just doing, once he figured out that you can make money by sending letters in the mail, he got hooked on marketing for life. Definitely want to check out The Ultimate Sales Letter. I'm going to throw this book in. It's not about marketing, but it's going to change your life if you really think about this book and really think about how it can apply to your life and your business. It's called The Goal, and specifically talks about a thing called the theory of constraints, which is something so powerful that I believe should get taught in primary school. If everybody read this book or learnt the theory of constraints in primary school, they would be mapping their entire life out very, very differently. They'll be doing things very differently. They wouldn't be wasting a lot of time. You got to think about it. You spend, off topic, but you waste 17% on average of your entire life doing primary school and high school. And, it's a lot of time to waste. And I'm going off tangent, obviously, but Theory of Constraints, The Goal by Dr. Eli Goldratt. published about 1984. Not a marketing book, but it's going to change your life if you read it, so I recommend it. Saving the best for last, a book called Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. It's a new book, or newish book, because it was written in the 1960s. This book is considered the #1 marketing or advertising book of all time. Up until recently, it would have cost you anywhere to get this book anywhere between $1,000 to $4,000 for a single secondhand copy of this book. But the gracious Bryan, who has the rights to this book, has republished this book, and you can now buy a copy for about $125 or so. It's still expensive for a book, but considering that you would have had to pay $4,000 or $2,000 for this book not long ago, it's a bargain by any means. And the knowledge, information, everything in this book is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is an absolute breakthrough. This book is an amazing, incredible book. It is hard to read, so I recommend that you do take the time out and just take the time to really understand the concepts, because you're going to learn a lot about things like the 5 levels of customer awareness, market sophistication, identity, and all kinds of things like that nobody else talks about. This guy, Eugene Schwartz, has done a lot of cool things. For one company, he sold $200 million worth of books through the mail for Rodale Press. That was just one of his clients. He's done a lot of other stuff as well. He's obviously passed now, but the legacy lives on. This book is the quintessential book that you want to get your hands on at all costs, because it is the marketing book that is the one that's going to finish your collection and improve your knowledge base dramatically. So that's it, guys. And that is all the books that I recommend that you read at least once to start off with, to really become a master of marketing and advertising and really elevate your knowledge base. And you're not going to be the same person that you were before you read them as you are when you finish reading them all. And have them in your collection so you can go back to them over and over again. I certainly obviously do have them in my collection, and definitely get on it and recommend it. And that's about it.